What is going on, everybody? Good morning and welcome to Grinders Live. It is, of course, the kickoff of Week 1. Here we are live from Vegas for the Grinders Party, and this great show is brought to you by the fine folks over at DraftKings.com. And I'll tell you what, if you like free money, if you like overlay, then you're going to like DraftKings.com this week because there seems to be a lot of it as we are about, I'd say, an hour and a half away from kickoff for this Week 1. If you don't know who I am Dan Bach, and I am going to be joined each and every Sunday morning with two good friends of mine and two very smart minds when it comes to daily fantasy football. We've got last year's runner-up in the big, I think it was a $5 million tournament last year, Al Smizzle, and of course John Tip and Pick Lee of FootballGuys.com, also a finalist in the Draft Street football final a year ago. Fellas, how you feeling this morning?
Pretty exciting.
I'm not feeling as good as you, Dan, but
Al, I have to say this much. I really wanted to be you this morning. And not for the reasons of which, you live your life not like a rock star, but, you're treated like a rock star. You get everything that you want. You've got a beautiful suite. But I wanted to be you this morning because you don't drink. And I really wish I didn't drink because whenever there's an open bar like we had last night at the Grinders kind of kickoff bash, I take way too much advantage of it, and I paid a dear price this morning. But you know what? I rallied, folks, so I made it. So I'm jealous of you, Smiz.
Yeah, well, EB is your middle name is Boot and Rally, I guess. So we're ready to talk about some NFL and all of the overlay that's out there. John Aguiar just posted on Twitter, there's roughly $2 million of overlay currently with 90 minutes left on DraftKings.com. So if you like equity, start firing.
Yeah, you can absolutely not beat the bang for your buck that you're going to be getting all across the industry, especially on DraftKings. Their Sunday Million tournament, the $200 buy-in is about half full at this point in time, so that's a $500,000 right there that you're looking at. Now, obviously, some of these tournaments are going to fill, but this is a great opportunity, John, for people to kind of get value on their entry. And, you wrote a good column on Football Guys about bankroll management, and we got to imagine it is super tough for people to follow some of those guidelines when you have such opportunities like you do today.
Yeah, I think it's actually worth pointing out, and I'm pretty sure that Card said something in the opening show this morning. Guys, don't get carried away today. We are working on limited information, basically preseason and what happened last year. And so while it's tempting to go ahead and dump money after money into these contests, you really need to use some degree of bankroll management. Make sure you're diversifying your lineups, and make sure you get enough exposure to those cash games as well to kind of keep yourself on the up and up.
All right, guys. Well, people are tuning in to hear some plays, who we like. Let's start out, though, with some of the injury news and notes. Of course, the news that kind of dropped the bomb on everybody last night was Antonio Gates and the fact that he is very questionable for their game against Arizona. And, Al, I know Gates is somebody you really had your eye on. Is he out of play for you now because of this news? I mean, we don't have anything official. I believe that's a 4 o'clock game, so we're probably not going to get the inactives in time for that one. How are you handling the Gates situation? Obviously DraftKings, you got late swap. It's not a big deal, but on FanDuel, you don't. Are you off of Gates on FanDuel?
Well, I wasn't really on Gates on FanDuel just because I didn't like his price there versus some of the other tight ends, but on DraftKings, as you mentioned, he's $3,400. Ladarius Green is $3,200. So guess what? Plug in Gates. If you find out he's inactive, late swap to Ladarius Green.
Does Green become more of a play for you on on FanDuel, or is it just too risky because of the possibility of Gates there? See, I kind of think he's okay on FanDuel because I don't think he's a bad play either way. Like, I still think he can be effective if Gates is on the field, but if Gates is inactive, that's a huge bump to him.
Yeah, okay, look, here's the thing, because when Gates is active, Ladarius Green, I don't have the numbers exactly in front of me. I can find them for you if you need it exactly, but if Gates and Ladarius Green are both active and 100%, Ladarius Green plays something like 40% of the snaps. And inside the red zone, Antonio Gates gets like 70% of the targets. So if Gates is there, even if he's hobbled, Ladarius Green is not an option for me. But if Gates is out, then yeah, Ladarius Green is going to get all of the tight end play. He's going to play all of the snaps, and he's going to get all of the service inside the red zone because he's just they believe in the next man up philosophy there in San Diego that, we're not going to change our game plan. We've got another guy that's capable, but if I know that Gates is out, all the Ladarius Green. But with Gates even a shadow possibly being there, I'm not interested.
John, the other news that hit on Thursday and kind of hurt some people on those Thursday night games was Andre Ellington with the Arizona Cardinals. He looked like a really good value play because he was obviously the featured back, gets a lot of touches in the passing game, but has a foot injury. I don't think there's anything official, but people are talking he's going to miss weeks at a time. So fairly certain he's not going to play on Monday night. Do you have any interest in Jonathan Dwyer now as a punt play? He's $3K on our sponsor site, DraftKings, and that is a much tighter cap than you see pretty much anywhere else, I think, in the industry. Is he a punt option for you or not so much?
Not so much. There's not a chance that I'm going to roster Jonathan Dwyer. We saw what he could do in Pittsburgh last year. He is not a good running back. There's nothing good about him. The upside is so limited. The floor is even low with him. The person that benefits the most there is Michael Floyd. I think maybe he gets a little bump in Arizona tomorrow night. But no, do not put Dwyer in your lineups if you like money.
There you go. Al, do you have any inactives for us today? I know that there was some nervousness with the New England Patriots and what the status of Gronkowski, and I think Brady came up questionable. Do you have those?
Dobson's out. James White is out for the Patriots. Gronkowski is active. Look, there was a game last year, remember when he first came back from injury, and he played like half the snaps, and he still got 17 targets. So they maximized anytime Gronk was on the field, Gronk was going to get the ball, or at least they were going to look his way. So even if he doesn't play 100% of the snaps, I still think there's going to be a lot of supply headed his way. But he is active, and James White being inactive, I think. One, it kind of makes a guy like Stephen Ridley a little bit more attractive, but not fully attractive. Shane Vereen becomes a lot more attractive to me as a play at the 6,100 level on DraftKings. However, can you ever really trust Bill Belichick to do what you think he's going to do? That is what brings in the trepidation for me, is that I can't trust. It's like I know what I think should happen. If it was a game of Madden, I know which way I'd allocate all the supply to the different players, but who knows what Belichick's going to call today?
Yeah, I mean, that's what the problem you have with them all year long is you just don't know whose number it's going to be. Even in the passing game, Edelman's a guy who's always a great option in PPR, but he can even kind of go silent. And that wide receiving core has definitely added, more names to it. So obviously New England, always an interesting situation. Well, let's jump in position by position here. Oh, the last bit of news, Cam Newton. I think we're waiting on to see if he is going to start. We're obviously going to have that fairly soon, if not already. But he's somebody which, even if he's in the lineup, I think you guys would agree, I would stay away. I guess if you want to go ultra contrarian, you could take him because you got to think most of the public's going to be away from him. But, that's something that we definitely got to keep our eye on this morning.
Yes.
All right, let's move into the quarterback spot here. We're going to break it down by position. We'll answer some questions at the end of the show. And, again, this is all brought to you by DraftKings.com. So many great tournaments over there today. Jump on over to DK, support the sponsor of Grinders Live, and let's jump into it, guys. Quarterback spot, Peyton Manning. I think he is going to be the most owned cash game play of the day. I think that a lot of the new players are going to think it's nice and easy and comfortable to roll with a guy that's, league MVP, record number of touchdowns. I suspect him to be the highest owned player today in cash games. Do you guys have exposure to him in your cash games?
I have maybe 10%. I have been a few that I made out this morning. My cash game stud for quarterback is Drew Brees. I think playing against Atlanta in a very high-scoring game where running back options are limited, which is one of the reasons my enthusiasm for Manning is kind of tempered, because I think they'll heavily use Monte Ball. They're 8-point favorites, so there's no reason they can't feed Monte Ball the ball 20, 22 times. And with Breeze, the the running back situation, the backfield there is kind of murky, and so I think that Sean Payton will, as he always does, use him very heavily for a price that's about $500 cheaper on most sites.
Yeah, Al, I think on FanDuel, Manning is definitively going to be the most popular cash game play. But DraftKings, we talked about the cap being a little bit tighter. I'm not sure I want to pay up on Manning. I've made a lot of even tournament teams today, and Manning just eats so much of that cap. I really don't have him over on DraftKings today. What's your take on him, and who would you say is your kind of top cash game play on DK today?
I don't have any cash game Mannings, and maybe I'm wrong in doing that, but I think that I want to spend up a little bit more on the position players, and kind of like John said, there's a lot of quarterbacks today that I can really think are going to throw the ball 40 times that are way less than Manning. And yes, you're locking in a great floor with Peyton Manning. Yes, he should have 3+ touchdowns anytime he takes the field for the Denver Broncos in that offense. However, it's going to restrict you in what you can buy at all the other positions. And as you mentioned, DraftKings is relatively tight pricing versus some of the other sites out there where you could roster Manning and still just plug in a bunch of all-pros. I think that balance is a much better way to go as opposed to stars and scrubs today on DraftKings for cash games.
And I have a hunch that you're on the Jay Cutler bandwagon today. I'm a little worried about it, because this seems to be a situation like we've seen it with Cutler before. You get excited about him, and then he doesn't play so hot. And it's usually the games where you don't get excited about him, where he goes for 3 or 4 touchdowns. I'm nervous. I've got exposure to him, but I follow you quite a bit, Al, and I know that you're pretty high on Cutler this week, aren't you?
Yeah, I like Cutler. I mean, it comes down to this. How many touchdowns on the year do you think Alshon Jeffrey is going to catch? How many do you think that Brandon Marshall is going to catch? How many catches is Brandon Marshall going to have? Matt Forte is going to have about 90 catches out of the backfield, probably about 4 or 5 receiving touchdowns. Their tight end's going to catch 5 or 6 receiving touchdowns. That adds up to like 35 touchdowns on the year. That's 2 a game. Somebody's got to throw those guys the ball, and right now it's Jay Cutler, and it's not like he's a bad quarterback. He's a good quarterback who gets a really bad rap, and any of the things that he does that's poor gets echoed and echoed and echoed so much that it kind of supports the narrative that he is a bad quarterback. And if he has a good game, people just kind of brush it off. It's like, oh, well, he'll screw up next week.
Now, John, you mentioned you're big on Breeze. Are you big on Matt Ryan? I mean, this is the same game. You got to imagine if Breeze is going to put up gaudy numbers, they're going to be ahead, and you're going to have an Atlanta team that's kind of playing from behind. They get Julio Jones back to start the season. I'm kind of high on Matt Ryan as a middle tier play. What's your thoughts?
Actually, I feel kind of the opposite, and I totally get the mentality of saying, look, this is going to be a shootout, and Atlanta's going to try to throw the ball. But the truth is, I think that the Saints secondary may be the best in the NFL this season. They've got a few new guys in there. They were very good last year in the secondary. Julio Jones is a phenomenal talent. Roddy White is the ageless wonder. They have a lot of great things going for them in Atlanta, and Matt Ryan is certainly a great quarterback. But I'm actually staying away from them this week. If I'm having any part of that offense, I'm going to actually have some Steven Jackson at the running back position, simply because I think they're going to try to hand off to him and keep Drew Brees off the field as much as they can, although obviously I don't think that's going to happen to the degree that you might think.
Okay, Al, Kaepernick or Romo for you? Those two guys have definitely been a talk of daily fantasy this week, expecting a lot of points in that. Both those defenses, San Francisco mainly banged up and has some suspensions that they have to deal with. But Dallas, we all know about how bad their defense is going to be this year. Who do you prefer between those guys? Pretty close salary on most sites. Take your pick.
For cash games, Kaepernick. For GPPs, I want Romo. I don't see very many ways that Kaepernick's going to throw the ball 50 times in this game. I can see a whole lot of ways that Tony Romo will. But I could also see Tony Romo ending this game with 200 yards passing and 1 touchdown, where I think Kaepernick is going to be accountable for maybe 2.5, and maybe one of them's on the ground. So for a cash game, I think Kaepernick has a way higher floor. But Romo has this ceiling of 500 yards and 3 touchdowns, kind of like we saw against Washington last year when they got into that shootout. As you mentioned, San Francisco missing Aldon Smith, going to be having some other injuries that they're going to have to deal with defensively. And Dean and I were talking before the show, before they went on the air, about how 49ers are getting by on reputation right now defensively, and people are avoiding them, but it's not the same defense. It's kind of like when you go into the store and it's like, oh, look, there's all these name brands. Well, the 49ers are the Tommy Hilfiger of defenses right now. Yeah, you guys used to be good, but I don't really want to wear it right now.
I would have preferred like a Z Cavarici reference.
That's way too old. That's like the 80s.
Hey, anybody in their mid-30s got it, okay? But Tommy Hilfiger, you're right. That's a good one. Okay, let's quickly move on to the cheap quarterbacks here, because coming into this week, the news with Bradford getting hurt, in the preseason, everybody got excited about Sean Hill, and then I think as the week's gone on, people have become a little bit more lukewarm, thinking that here's a guy, he has thrown a handful of passes in the last 4 years in regular season play. Do you guys, John, do you have exposure to Sean Hill this week as kind of a punt option at QB?
I do. Not as much as I think most people are going to have. Look, there's almost no way he doesn't reach value in a cash game. He needs 200 yards passing to do that. If he gets a touchdown, you're in the money with respect to that. And you can really load up then on those high caliber running backs like Charles and Forte and McCoy. You can really do a whole lot if you roster him. I think the problem is there is a possibility that he doesn't do a whole lot, and they hand the ball off to Zach Stacy 25 times, which they've done in the past. So there is a bit of a question mark there, but if I had to guess one way or the other, I would say that he reaches value for cash games.
Al, any other punt QB options you like this week besides Hill?
Yeah, I think Ryan Fitzpatrick makes for a very nice tournament play in terms of
I will say this much. You're the first person I've heard mention Ryan Fitzpatrick in every single column, article, Grinders Live all week long. I don't think there's been a single reference to him. So I +1 for you on that.
Well, I mean, look at his percentage owned from the Thursday tournaments was very low. His price is like a notch higher than Sean Hill. Sean Hill is not running any touchdowns in ever, not even on Madden. He can't even do it on the PlayStation. So for a guy that has access to maybe possibly running a touchdown in, has Andre Johnson and DeAndre Hopkins to throw the ball to, as well as a very good pass-catching tight end, even though Graham is out, all of their tight ends, their entire core is solid. And Arian Foster can catch the ball out of the backfield as well, although he could get his 20 carries. I think that it's very possible that a guy like Fitzpatrick throws for 2 touchdowns and 250-plus yards against a defense in the Redskins that was just poor last year, and I think that that's kind of insulting to other poor defenses to say that the Redskins lived up to being just poor.
Okay, I kind of got Tip and Pick's favorite fade being Matt Ryan this week. So, Smiz, who's your favorite fade at the quarterback spot? The guy that you think a lot of people are going to be on that you kind of want to go the other way on that you're not as confident in?
I don't know. I haven't. Well, I think Matt Ryan would be the one. John actually mentioned it. I really don't have any Matt Ryan in any tournament lineups, and it may be wrong because I think that game could shoot out. In the case that it does, and they are at home, and it's just an easier environment to throw in than at the Superdome. But as John mentioned, I think New Orleans and Ryan's going to have that. Well, their defensive coordinator is Ryan also, so that's confusing.
Yes,
but I think that he's going to have something for him. He's going to come after him real hard. And even though Matt Ryan could have to throw the ball 50 times today, he could throw a couple of picks, and that's really going to be a problem, in my opinion. So I'm not as high on the Falcons as everybody else seems to be. But I think there are a couple of, like I said, like Fitzgerald is kind of sneaky. I think that there's some sneaky quarterbacks that people don't have that could have pretty good games, like Ben Roethlisberger.
All right, let's
add one more thing, Dan.
Yeah.
I see some people in the chat kind of upset about this whole fade the Falcons stuff. Guys, it's not that they're a bad play. It's simply that at that salary, we're looking at $8,000 for a lot of these guys. They're just better plays at those levels, and the likelihood of them bombing at $8,000 is much higher than the other guys at that same price range.
All right, let's move on to the running back position, and I think everyone will agree the top 2 names on the board this week, Jamal Charles and LaShawn McCoy. Al, is this a do you prefer the lobster or the steak situation with these guys? Like, it doesn't really matter. You can't. I don't think there's much justification to say one is that much better than the other.
Yeah, I mean, I prefer McCoy. I can understand why other people prefer Charles, especially with Bo out. He's going to get a little bit more of the action. There's a lot of weapons on the Eagles, and they do tend to spread it around a little bit. But there's no other running backs, and I just think he's going to get his 25 to 30 touches against a defense that, while it is improved, was pretty bad last year. It's game's the second highest total on the day. They have the second highest team total on the day. I expect a lot out of that, and I love taking favored running backs at home. Going with John Bales' research, where he has indicated that's pretty profitable. Obviously, the Chiefs are in that same situation. Like you said, it's 6 of one and half dozen of another. The difference between the two is because of the pricing on DraftKings, the pricing on FanDuel, more people are gravitating to McCoy, even if they had Charles as their number one, because he's a little bit cheaper. So if you want to be a little bit contrarian, get a little bit off the beaten path, you can have the same type of guy in Jamal Charles if you're willing to spend up a little bit more and have a guy that's a third of the percentage owned as the first guy.
John, I was talking to, I think, Jesse here at the party a couple nights ago, and he brought up a good point about Adrian Peterson. He has not really played a snap, I believe, in the preseason. I think he's the ultimate just stay away for me. I know he's one of the best running backs in the league, obviously in the last decade or so, but I'm just not sure that he's going to be physically, I don't want to say ready to play, but especially with the matchup versus St. Louis, I don't think it's totally ideal to roll Adrian Peterson, especially like on FanDuel where he's only 100 less than McCoy. DraftKings, you got a much bigger margin between, say, him and Jamal Charles, but I'm a stay away on Peterson this week. I've got very limited exposure to him. Could blow up in my face. He could go for 3 touchdowns. He's got that ability, but for me, he's a stay away. What's your take?
I kind of agree with you. I think that the matchup is not good for him. The St. Louis Rams front seven is amongst the best in the country, maybe right there with the Jets front seven. So the matchup is not great. And if you consider the big 4 running backs, those being McCoy, Forte, Charles, and Peterson, he's my least favorite. But he's Adrian Peterson. And Adrian Peterson can do whatever he wants. The fact that he didn't play in preseason does not scare me a little bit. He's a veteran. He knows what he's doing. This guy comes to camp. He's in shape. He's ready to go. And so I actually think that Peterson makes a wonderful GPP play this week because of those 4 running backs, he'll be the lowest owned. And this guy can put up 200 yards for 3 touchdowns on any given week against any defense. Cash games, no.
Okay, Al, if this was a year ago, let's say this was week 17 of last year, and you looked at these matchups, you would have said, okay, Fred Jackson, C.J. Spiller, load them up. The Bears cannot stop the run. This is what makes week 1 so difficult. We don't know what the Bears defense is going to look like here compared to what they did last year. What's your feeling on these Buffalo running backs? Do you feel like if you're running multiple lineups, you better have some exposure to them? Are they cash game plays? I think it's a really intriguing position to talk about here with these guys because a year ago they would have been absolute no-brain plays, especially Fred Jackson at a fairly low salary.
Well, Fred Jackson's the interesting one to me between him and C.J. Spiller. C.J. Spiller, you're hoping he busts off a 60-yard touchdown.
Yeah.
And then you're hoping he does it again. Okay, that's really not really likely. But a guy like Fred Jackson at his price, he's going to be in on all third downs, going to be in on all passing downs, and he's going to be the goal line back. And on a site like DraftKings, where it's a full point for a PPR, I think he provides a tremendous value. You could use him in cash games. I wouldn't be against that. It's a nice way to save money with kind of a high floor. Even if the Bears aren't as bad as they were against the run last year, they're going to be improved from what they were last year. I mean, they were a good defense against the run the first 4 weeks until they lost Melton and they lost Briggs. They basically lost the entire middle of their defense, and then once that happened, it was just holes as big as you could drive a truck through. So they've done a lot of retooling. They've got guys back, but they're not going to be great against the run. Even if they're just average against the run, I still think that guys like Jackson and Spiller are solid plays, especially for GPPs. Jackson more for cash.
Outside of Charles and McCoy, because I think that they're going to be really popular today. John, who do you think is the next most popular running back out there this week?
If you're smart, it's going to be Frank Gore. I think he's going to be very popular. It's just a matter of whether people realize that. A lot of people are worried about Carlos Hyde stealing carries. I don't know that I'm so concerned with that. I mean, Harbaugh's going to use him a little bit, but I can't imagine they're going to throw a rookie in there on opening day to steal half of Gore's carries. Gore's very affordable, multiple sites. I like him a lot, and I think Monte Ball is going to be another very popular pick. And in fact, I think Monte Ball will be the more popular pick, which answers your original question.
See, I think you hit it on the first name. I think Frank Gore at 5,200 on DraftKings. Boy, I mean, you can't really beat that based on the matchup here. I mean, I know, Al, you probably have a little sour taste in your mouth with Frank Gore, but you can even agree at that number. You almost need. I mean, look at the guys around him: Trent Richardson, Ben Tate, Chris Johnson, and Frank Gore. I mean, he just stands out as probably being like 1,000, 1,500 underpriced on DraftKings.
Yeah, I mean, he's just way too cheap. He doesn't catch the ball. So on a full PPR site, you want running backs that are going to get out there, but against a team like Dallas, you kind of have to weigh what you're looking for, So that defense is bad, like really bad, like maybe the worst ever. So if Gore gets, let's say, 23 touches today, even if they limit his work, he didn't work in the preseason because why expose him to that? I still think he's going to get his 20 carries today. Carlos Hyde they're not going to go 15-15. It's not a Jeremy Hill, Giovanni Bernard situation where they're going to split the carries, 200 each for the course of the season. Gore is still going to get the lion's share until he goes down. So I don't mind Frank Gore at all. As we said, I think this game's going to be a shootout. I think San Francisco is going to try and do what they do, which is we're going to punch in the mouth and run the ball. And they're going to do that with Frank Gore. At 5,200, how do you not play him?
Tend to agree with you. On DraftKings, we talk about Shane Vereen at 6,100. I think that stands out as a nice value for the reasons that you kind of talked about being PPR. No James White today, not that we knew exactly what his role was going to be, but at least one less running back to worry about and a guy who has been known to catch the ball out of the backfield out there in college. Vereen, for me, I've got a lot of exposure to him today. I think that, Miami, their defense is all right, but, Vereen, he had some of those monster, 8, 9 reception games a year ago, and when you can get 9 points before you even accumulate a single yard touchdown, that's a great spot to be in. I don't know that's going to happen today, but he's definitely one of my favorite middle-tier guys. What do you think, John?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's reasonable. The thought there, I actually wonder how much Gronk is going to play. If Gronk plays more than we suspect, I think that devalues Vereen a bit. But look, I think Vereen, we saw it last year. There were games where he caught 12 or 13 passes. I mean, if he does that today, that pick there is golden. As far as other guys that might be in that price range that are worthy of thinking about, I think we said earlier, Fred Jackson is another guy that's going to see 3 to 6 passes, goal line carries, and probably a dozen carries. And so he's another guy I like in that area.
Is there anybody to punt with at running back? Because I'm not really seeing anything out.
No, not right now. I mean,
Toby Gerhart, he's not even a true punt because he's kind of middle-tiered. I've got him on some of my Manning teams, at least on FanDuel this week. I don't feel great about it. I really don't know what to think. It's one of those things where we could all be, it could be a situation where he's way better than we think, or he could be way worse than we think. So I think it's pretty risky, but at least he's going to get the carries. They're not going to go to Denard Robinson, who weighs about $120 very often, I think. So I think there's not a lot of risk per se in him, but he's one guy I'm looking at.
Yeah, there's just not a lot of punts there for me, unless some late injury news or somebody starting that wasn't supposed to be starting happens between now and 10 a.m. Pacific time. I don't think that anything is going to change the fact that running back is a spend position this week.
Any interest in Ryan Matthews at all?
Not for me.
No, I don't have him.
Yeah, I normally would say no against Arizona, but with their banged-up defense, 5,400 on DraftKings might be a tournament play worth considering. Favorite fade for you this week? Running back spot, tip and pick.
PPR Peterson for the reasons we said. I like him as a GPP play, but I'm staying away from him in my cash games.
Al, favorite fade?
Well, it looks like it's academic now, but mine was Ellington. If you look through my Thursday lineups, I had 0 Ellington on FanDuel. I was just kind of fading him from the go. I don't trust the coaching staff with him. I don't care. I'm in wait-and-see mode with him. I would agree that Peterson is a guy that I have none of either.
Okay, let's move on to wideout, which I think is obviously a position you can save on for sure. I think we agree running back, not a whole lot of reasons to kind of punt that position. We'll talk about values first, but if you could have your choice, Calvin Johnson or Demaryius Thomas this week, who do you prefer, Al?
From a cash game perspective, from a percentage owned perspective, I would rather have Calvin. Just looking at everything else, all things being equal, Demaryius Thomas can put up fantastic games, so can Calvin Johnson. But if one is going to be 35 to 40% owned and the other one's going to be 5 to 12% owned, give me the one that's way less percentage owned. Knowing what we know now going into the week, a lot of people are going to be on those Broncos for good reason. They're safe. And in a week with a lot of uncertainty, when we don't have a lot of data other than last year's data, people are going to look to the safest place possible. And Demaryius Thomas is pretty safe, although there are a lot of targets there. For Peyton Manning, and Peyton Manning does not usually focus on one guy. He does spread the ball around, and he's got both Thomases. He's got Sanders. He can fling the ball to Monty Ball out of the backfield. Even the third wide receiver could catch 2 touchdowns today. Latimer. So for me, there's no other target in Detroit. You could say, oh yeah, Golden Tate's there, and Reggie Bush catches some balls, but when Matt Stafford takes a 5-step drop, his eyes don't go anywhere but Calvin.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think you bring up a good point about the contrarian side of things. Even though he is, arguably the best, wide receiver in the league, he's under-owned this week. Mark my words on that. Dez Bryant, he's somebody who obviously has tremendous upside, but for a great receiver, John, he can kind of go silent at times. Just have those games where he's only got like 3 catches for 30 yards. Is he a cash game play this week? Going in this game that we expect a lot of firepower, or is he just strictly tournament for you?
Dan, I heard the second part of the question. We were just looking in the chat. It looks like Cam Newton is out. Is that confirmed?
Adam Levitan posted on Twitter that according to Jay Glazer on Fox, so this is now third-hand information, that the plan right now is to hold out Cam Newton.
I'm not surprised, especially hearing Rivera's comment saying it's a marathon, not a sprint. That kind of gave it away. We're not going to sacrifice our season for 1 week. So I'm guessing, is there backup like Derek Anderson?
That's what we're just looking up now.
Yeah.
Derek, he is terrible.
Bump up Tampa Bay's defense.
Yeah.
I really like them, so they're really good now.
Bump up Tampa's defense. Not that there was a lot bumped up on the wide receiving core of Carolina anyway, but I think we can probably say goodbye to Kelvin Benjamin as a value play at the wide receiver spot. So big news there. No Cam Newton this week, and definitely it'll be interesting to see with all the new people how many people still roster him. See what his percentage owns is going to be in these larger tournaments. Back to the wide receiver spot. What's your thoughts on Dez?
On Dez, he's one of my top cash plays this week. There's no way this guy doesn't get 6 to 8 catches, 100 yards and a touchdown. He's one of my top plays. I just can't see any way that Dallas isn't playing from behind. I'm a Dallas fan. I love. I must be a masochist, I guess, but they're going to throw and throw and throw. And Dez Bryant is a huge target in that red zone. Favorite target of Tony Romo. I think I would plug him into all lineups, GPP and cash.
Okay, Al. Don't give me the answer that I know you were probably going to give me.
So
you love Jay Cutler.
Yes.
And you have to handcuff him with Brandon Marshall or Alshon Jeffrey. Who do you use? Did you just give me Alshon Jeffrey, right?
Yeah, I like Alshon Jeffrey.
I thought you were going to say Marshall. I thought you were going to say Marshall for cash, Jeffrey for GPP. But I'm glad you didn't.
I like Alshon Jeffrey.
I
understand people that like Marshall too. I just personally like Jeffrey this week.
I think there's much bigger upside with Jeffrey. He's been an absolute freak for the Bears after about week 4 last season. So I'm with you. That's who I'm handcuffing Cutler with this week. Okay, moving on to some middle tier guys. Michael Floyd, we talked about, gets a little bit of a bump. I think we are all in agreement. We want Michael Floyd over Larry Fitzgerald.
Yes. Yes.
What about Roddy White, John? You mentioned to me.
That's the interesting thing with Ellington out. I think that they both get a bump, and I think that they're going to lean a little bit more on Larry Fitzgerald at this point than they were maybe originally planning to.
Preseason Floyd looked very good.
He does.
Yeah. So that's my, and going back to what you said earlier, if one's going to be higher percentage owned, the people who aren't watching every day, they're going to put Fitzgerald in simply because they know the name. And I would rather have the advantage where percentage owned is concerned.
Who was more owned on Thursday? Because I really don't know.
I don't know.
I would assume Floyd, just from all the preseason buzz on Floyd, was higher owned than Fitzgerald. But I don't know for sure. But maybe Chad can check it out for us.
I'll tell you who I think is flying under the radar, which is surprising. He had touchdowns in his last 5 games at the end of last season. And he was talked about like season-long drafts. Cordarrelle Patterson. I've not heard a lot of buzz about him this week. Going against St. Louis. I mean, this guy's the best playmaker they have. Obviously, not named Adrian Peterson, but I love him this week, and I don't think there's enough buzz on him. Do you guys have exposure to Patterson?
I love his game. I don't love him in this game.
Why not?
Because the Rams are good on defense.
What he said.
Okay. Well,
if you're gonna take somebody last night at the Grinders party, DP was saying DP 47 was saying that Cordarrelle Patterson, if you're gonna take him, should also take the Vikings defense.
That's my play.
That's
always the double dip.
It's a smart.
Exactly.
So if you like him, that's a good play. I mean, you get in there, he runs one back, you get 12 points for that touchdown. I kind of like that angle, but this week I'm not on him. He's a phenomenal talent. I'll be using him this year, but just not this week.
All right. Moving on, T.Y. Hilton. Any interest in him?
I have interest in anybody that's going to catch passes in that game.
Is he going to catch passes in that game?
Yes.
I think he and Andrew Luck are a nice little handcuff that not a lot of people will have.
I agree. The interesting one is who's lining up on the other side of Hilton? Is it Nix?
Well, Reggie Wayne yeah.
Wayne's there, but I don't know.
Wayne's there, but he's still hobbled with that ACL. What percentage of the plays is he actually going to play this week?
I think he's in. I think he's playing a high percentage of plays. I mean,
how many times do you think Luck's going to throw the ball this week?
I would say 40.
I'll go over 40.
Over 40?
Yeah, so I think he's going to throw a little closer to 50 than 40, which means he's probably going to complete about 55, 60% of those, if not a little bit greater than that, which means that there's 25 to 30-something catches that are going to have to be made. And they're not all going to go to T.Y. Hilton. They're going to go to a lot of people. I think Allen's a good play at tight end. I think that Nix is going to be a very under-owned great GPP play. You mentioned Wayne. If you think he's healthy enough to play a bunch of snaps, then great. I like all the Broncos wide receivers. I think Emmanuel Sanders will be the highest percentage owned guy in cash games at wide receiver. Pick a pass catcher in that game, and you should feel good at lineup lock.
John, there's a guy with the New Orleans Saints who is starting to get on my rosters a lot this morning, and that's Brandon Cooks. Kenny Stills looks like he's not going to play. Do you have a lot of exposure to Cooks? Do you like him this week?
I do like him. I have more exposure to Colston simply because there's an established relationship there. But if you want to go with Cooks, I could not fault you at all. I think that I already said that I think Breeze is going to throw a bunch of passes. In terms of the pecking order, it's going to be Jimmy Graham, Colston, and then Cooks. But Cooks is a great GPP play, I would imagine.
Al, no Cecil Shorts for Jacksonville.
Yeah.
Somebody's got to catch the ball there, right? I mean, is it Marquise Lee? Is it Alan Hearns? Or is it just like, I don't care? I'm not rostering Jacksonville players.
I don't mind. Why would you not roster a team that's going to throw the ball a ton?
Who's the guy, though? That's the question.
I think Hearns is going to be the possession guy. I think Lee is the better target in the red zone. He's got more size, it's better at boxing out, all those sorts of things. When you get it into man-to-man coverage inside the 10-yard line, you've got to be able to shake that one guy that's going to be in your hip pocket. I think that Lee is more suited for that. But Hearns had a fantastic preseason. He's been listed as the starter opposite Lee today and not Robinson. So at 3K, I don't mind him. At 3,500 on DraftKings, I don't mind Lee at all. I don't think either of them have like massive upside. I'm not expecting like 8 catches for 150 and 3 touchdowns. But Philly forces you to chase because they're going to get into the end zone. They're going to score. You're not going to stop them from doing that on any given week. So therefore, that kind of correlates with Jacksonville having to throw the ball a lot, more than they're normally going to. Even though they're going to try and run it with Gerhardt, they're going to try and slow the game down. They're going to have to throw at some point, more than likely the entire second half, which means a lot of targets for guys like Hearns and Lee.
Tip and pick. Give me a nice punt play at wide receiver for our viewers here today.
FanDuel, I have 100% of Jeremy Maclin at 5,000. I just don't see how you don't play him. He was a target monster in 2012, and I think FanDuel missed the pricing on him, so I've got him everywhere. On DraftKings, let's see, who do I have? Well, I like the San Francisco receivers, but I guess they're not punt plays. Caldwell's a guy that at 3,000 for Denver, I could see him having a decent floor and a very high ceiling with Peyton Manning at the helm.
You like him better than Latimer? I don't.
Well, that's why we play the game, Dan.
Al, Emmanuel Sanders on DraftKings, I think he looks awfully underpriced over there.
Yeah, and he's going to be the highest owned guy in cash games. In your head-to-heads, I would rather let somebody else make the mistake. I'll pick him just to block in my head-to-heads on DraftKings. In case the other guy has him, great. In case the other guy doesn't have him, then I'll let him make the mistake of not rostering that guy, and then we'll just move on. I'll just use it as, okay, I don't have a third wide receiver. My third wide receiver is just going to be Emmanuel Sanders. If they don't have him, I feel like I've got an edge at that position. If they do use him, whatever, it crosses itself off.
Okay, moving on. Tight end spot. Jimmy Graham obviously is everybody's favorite tight end, and I think this matchup against Atlanta, who's got a bad defense, makes him a really good play. On FanDuel on a softer cap, I can't really find a reason either not to take him or just kind of punt it altogether. On DraftKings, though, at 7,200, you're going to use up a lot of that salary cap. He's obviously the Peyton Manning of the quarterback position in terms of salary. How much Graham do you have on DraftKings, Smiz?
I have some. It was hard for me to fit him into my cash game lineup, and maybe that's a mistake. I look at tight end one of two ways. I'm either going to go for the cheapest guy that I think is in a good spot, and on FanDuel, that's Zach Ertz, and on DraftKings, that's Antonio Gates, because it allows me to spend on other positions. But there's an advantage to be had when you have basically a wide receiver, an extra one, a fourth wide receiver, playing at your tight end spot, but you have to pay up for him. It's $7,200. I can find wide receivers, as you mentioned. Emmanuel Sanders, obviously not going to be as good as Graham, but at $4,800, we talked about Colston, who's way less than Graham as well. There's a lot of options at wide receiver who are equal to Graham. Maybe a guy like Alshon Jeffrey or Brandon Marshall are kind of equal to Graham, let's say, in terms of statistical output, floors, and ceilings, but they're about the same price. And I can't find a wide receiver, or many wide receivers that are as cheap as guys like Antonio Gates or Zach Ertz or guys in that 4K and below range that can do what they can do. I mean, how about a guy like Witten at 4,500 on DraftKings? In a game that I think they're going to have to throw a ton, can have a Gates-ish game at 3K less that I can now spend on a running back or a wide receiver.
Yeah, I think he's too expensive on DK to have too much exposure to him. I think it just eats up your salary cap. Punt plays, tip and pick. He mentioned Ertz. I agree on FanDuel for sure. Any other guys in the lower tier, if people want to punt the position, that you would recommend?
I like Heath Miller this week. He's back with Pittsburgh. He established with Ben Roethlisberger. I watched them a lot in preseason because of my role with football guys, and anytime that Ben gets in trouble, and he gets in trouble a lot with that offensive line, he's dumping it off to Heath Miller, and I think that he's a guy that I would rely upon. in both cash games and GPPs at that lower echelon.
I think he'll be under-owned too, and I think you're right on the money there. No Cotchery, no Emmanuel Sanders this year. I mean, Marcus Wheaton is like their number 2. He's not very good. So, what's that?
He has nice hair.
He's got nice hair?
Yeah, Marcus Wheaton. You got to give him something. I mean, you can't.
Okay. He was okay at Oregon State. There we go. But yeah, I think that he's sneaky good. I don't think a lot of people will be on Miller, and I could easily see him, like Al said, having maybe even a 2-touchdown game, and you're looking at a 4K price on our sponsor DraftKings. You just cannot beat that. Okay, well, we'll get some questions in just a minute, so get ready to queue those up. We're going to move on to defense, but again, this is, of course, Grinders Live, presented by DraftKings.com. And the news, Cam Newton is out, so do not put him in your rosters today. Antonio Gates is questionable on our sponsor site, DraftKings. Again, very easy pivot from him to Ladarius Green, who would get a huge bump if he is ruled inactive for this Sunday. And then Cecil Shorts also out for the Jacksonville Jaguars. So those are some of the notable scratches. Rob Gronkowski is in here today in the lineup. Okay, moving on to defense special teams. Are we all going to run out and put Tampa Bay in now, Al?
Just doing that right now.
Yeah, Derek Anderson drawing the start there. He is not a good quarterback. So, yeah, look to Tampa. I think DraftKings priced him pretty well this week, unless you did like a ridiculous mega punt on the Jaguars. Who wants the Cowboys? Who wants the Colts? Vikings defense was so bad last year. Saints, good defense, but high-scoring game. The lower tier, there's not a whole lot there on DraftKings that I think is particularly appealing. But on FanDuel, you've got some teams like Detroit mixed in at like near min salary. I really like them as kind of a punt play at home against that Giants offense, which, let's face it, John, that is probably the ugliest-looking offense we've ever seen so far this preseason.
Yeah, they look terrible. How many? Eli threw 27 interceptions last year. Yeah, a pick six is completely viable with that play. Another one that I like for the same reason in terms of how they looked in the preseason. Washington didn't score a touchdown in 4 games, and Houston, playing at home, looking for a comeback season, has a defense that's healthy. They have 3 studs. Jadeveon Clowney's making his debut. Brian Cushing is back. That dude is the backbone of that defense. And then you add J.J. Watt to the mix. It could be a long day for the Redskins.
Al, anybody else that you think will be under-owned that you think could be – because let's face it, defense sometimes can swing these giant tournaments.
I mean, look, the things that you can handicap on defense are quarterback pressures, tackles in the backfield, things that you can do along those natures, team totals to an extent. You got a team that's going to score a few points, but who's going to put you in the best position for a defensive touchdown? Because there is randomness in terms of if an interception or a fumble recovery goes all the way back. So I think the Texans are a fantastic team that can do that because of how much pressure they can put in the backfield and on the quarterback. It's going to create hurried throws. It's going to create bad throws that can become a pick six and go the other way. If Clowney or Watt gets their hands on a quarterback from the backside, it could turn into a fumble, which there's nobody to stop you if you scoop it up from going the rest of the direction. The interesting thing now, though, at that same price, the Buccaneers and the Texans are exactly the same price on DraftKings. With the Cam news at 3,100, what is your preferred defense, Dan, the Buccaneers or the Texans?
Funny, somebody just posted that question in chat. I was going to ask you. I will take the Bucs over the Texans with the news of Cam Newton.
Yeah, probably the right route to go.
And you know what? I don't think it's – I think that, with it being such a late bit of news, I don't think it's going to be overly popular. I don't think, the newer players are going to go in and kind of change all their rosters up. Now, obviously, the Sharps are going to be able to do that easy switch on DraftKings, but I think they're still not going to be super high-owned because of, it breaking so late that he is not going to play. All right, give us your questions in the chat. We got 5 minutes, and then we got to go and finish up our lineup. So here we go. Colston or Michael Floyd this week, cash games?
Colston.
Yeah, Colston.
I think Colston's a safer play. Bolden or Colston? I think it's Colston.
Yeah, I do too.
Yeah, it's Colston.
Okay, let's see if we can get some more questions here. Let's see. Do you like Eric Decker for the price?
DK, maybe, not on FanDuel.
I like Decker, actually. I don't mind Geno Smith. I hate the Raiders' defense. I mean, I love the Raiders' defense in terms of attacking it, but it's just a bad team. And Decker is a fantastic red zone target. Absolutely like Decker today. He's the only guy that Geno's got to throw to in the red zone.
What about Jason Morrow?
Sure, I'm not going to play a rookie tight end, though. It's like I think that Amaro's going to progress as the season goes on. Amaro can catch a touchdown any week, but I think that as far as the red zone targets are going to go, I think that he's going to get – I mean, last year on the Broncos with all those targets, Decker led that team in red zone targets at about 33, 34%. I think that jumps well over 50% on the Jets this year.
Okay, we got some questions rolling in here on punt wide receivers. Wheaton, Marquise Lee, or Justin Hunter?
For me, it's Lee. He's got a good last name, so you can't beat it.
I like Lee as well. Hearns or Latimer for you, Al?
Hearns. Not even close.
Okay. Decker or Emmanuel Sanders? I think I'd take Emmanuel Sanders there.
Decker's going to get his fair share of receptions, but I think Sanders is more likely to score a touchdown, despite what Al just said.
I mean, just there's going to be more supply. There's going to be more trips to the red zone for the Broncos.
Yeah, we agree.
Yeah.
Somebody says Kendall Wright, Terrence Williams, Pierre Thomas. I think Terrence Williams might not play today, so definitely wouldn't use him. Kendall Wright or Pierre Thomas. I really don't like either of those two, so I would say pick again.
I'd go Pierre Thomas out of that combo.
Probably, yeah, maybe.
He's gonna run the ball a little bit. He's gonna fill the Sproles role on third down. He's gonna catch a lot of passes.
I think Ingram, though, I don't know. I think he's gonna get more reps than people think.
No, to run the ball, yes, but as far as catching the ball, it's gonna be all Thomas, in my opinion, out of the backfield.
Let's see. Last but not Avery or Hearns. Avery's a guy who's the #1 wide receiver in Kansas City. Nobody's talking about him.
And then there's a reason for that. I don't know. I'm not real big on anybody outside of Charles on that squad. I like Kelsey a lot for the season. I would like to see how how Andy Reid employs him. Generally, he does employ his tight ends and use them to a heavy degree. If I'm taking a wide receiver from Kansas City today, I'm doing it in GPP format, and I'm going to go with Frankie Hammonds, an undrafted free agent signing, who looked really good in preseason, and I'm sure he's going to be like no owns, which is why I really like him over Avery.
All right, guys, that does it for us. Head on over to DraftKings. Look at some of these numbers. You've got 3,600 out of 7K entries in a $12 King of the Beach qualifier. Their Sunday Million tournament, 32-33 out of 5,555. So tons of overlay over there. Take advantage of it. Be smart with your bankroll, but if there's value to be had, jump on it. For John and Al, I'm Dan Bach. Thank you to DraftKings, our great sponsor of the show. We'll be back next Sunday live from our homes. Good luck this weekend. We're going to go party it up out with the Grinders Party 2014. I say goodbye. Al, give us the sign-off.
Bye, everybody.